Lu Yu opened his eyes and found himself on the back mountain, just off the battlefield. He lowered his head and looked, holding a dark spark in his hand. He looked up again and saw a human body standing in front of him, resembling a galactic Ultraman. Lu Yu panicked. I said I'm really not the Dark Roadbed Al, do you believe me? Aier. I believe it. Galaxy. I believe it for now. After finally getting through the galaxy level, Lu Yu opened his eyes again. People are on L77 star, just stepping on Leo. Lu Yu panicked again. He quickly untied the rope for Leo. I said I didn't actually want to invade your planet, do you believe me? Leo. Hee. Siwen. Lu Yu carefully opened his eyes this time. People are in Gauss, flying fighter jets to fight against Ladolias. Thank you for your invitation. The plane crashed and people died. Key points. Opening flow, with a vest, growth-oriented, no female lead, the protagonist is timid, please take good care of, book friend group. 104-689-5992, 3 books in the same group. Keywords of the novel. People in Otto, my vest is not very good without pop-ups, people in Otto, my vest is not very good. Download the complete text, people in Otto, my vest is not very good. Latest chapter reading. Chapter 1. Man on the Back Mountain, just off the battlefield. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 1. Man on the Back Mountain, just off the battlefield. A rumbling sound echoed in my ears. Lu Yu was awakened and opened his eyes in a daze, feeling a dazzling white light in his sight. Later, he saw 2 huge figures in the light, one was a silver-red figure, and the blue crystal on his chest shimmered with dazzling light, sacred and dazzling. The other one is dark and unremarkable, unable to find a suitable adjective. The light and shadow of these 2 giants are intertwined, and they are fighting, and the grand roar is precisely from this. Why is it a bit familiar? Lu Yu rubbed his eyes in confusion and was about to take a closer look when the silver giant's hands suddenly emitted an extremely brilliant rainbow beam of light. Boom! A deafening sound suddenly rang in my ears, and the colorful light rushed towards the black giant, annihilating his figure inch by inch. A strong energy shock wave also ravaged towards this side. Lu Yu's eyes suddenly darkened, and he fell into a state of emptiness and ignorance. I don't know how long it took, but when he regained his senses, he felt a slight swelling and pain in his brain. Lu Yu rubbed his head and sat up, yawned before squinting his eyes to look around in the bright sunlight. On the left are trees in the mountains and forests, on the right is a smoking ruins, and not far away are unfamiliar buildings. And I was sitting on the ground with gravel and dirt, my buttocks still feeling a bit uncomfortable. He remained dazed in his eyes for 2 seconds. Lu Yu. Sleeping trough. After waking up, he went to the wilderness. At this moment, Lu Yu inexplicably felt like there was something in his arms. He lowered his head and, with some confusion, picked up a black-purple prop. It is heavy, with a pure black handle and a red gemstone in the middle, with dark purple lines extending from both sides. Lu Yu remained silent for a moment. This is the dark spark, he knows, after all, when a certain generation made toys, he even went to grab the limited edition. However, the one in my hand doesn't seem very plastic to the touch. It has a heavy metallic texture and a very good hand feel. After playing with it with interest for a while, Lu Yu suddenly realized it. So why am I sleeping here? The battle between light and darkness has come to an end. The galactic Ultraman and Dark Roadbed Al traveled from Earth to the universe, then from the universe to the moon, and finally used the galactic cross impact to blast Roadbed Al into flying ash. Peace has been restored in Jiangxing town. But after sending away the monsters and cosmic beings sent to Earth, the galactic Ultraman, who should have been separated from the light in the auditorium, suddenly hesitated. Xiaoguang, it seems that. What's going on? The auditorium light knew that the parting was imminent, and at this moment, his mood was also a bit low, but he still managed to muster up his energy and show a smile. I feel like Gigi Al is still on Earth, said the Milky Way. Said the hall light. In the final duel, it was clear that they had eliminated the dark base of Al, but at this moment, one could hear from the hesitant tone of the Milky Way that there seemed to be hidden secrets. The members of the hall, who were worried about falling stars in the town, quickly ran towards the ruins behind the mountain, relying on the shared sense of the Milky Way. He didn't search for long and soon saw the figure standing alone. After the darkness dissipated, the sunlight was extremely brilliant, and the golden light broke through the clouds and scattered on a messy ruins, outlining a desolate picture among the ruins. Wearing an ordinary black shirt, a boy of his age stood on the edge of the ruins, looking up at the wreckage of the battlefield. Suddenly, he seemed to sense the arrival of the hall light and turned his head to look. The young man is very good looking, with a slightly messy black natural curl on his head, a sharp and slightly immature face, narrow eyes slightly raised, eyebrows stained with a hint of sharpness, and a calm gaze that gives him a hint of coldness. The whole face is quite aggressive. But his gaze upon him was drowsy, as if he didn't care about anything, with a strange sense of disgust towards the world. The auditorium was momentarily stunned. After reacting, the sense of power made him widen his eyes and blurt out, Gigi Al. The young man across from him had a stunned expression, and his aggressive appearance had been diluted a lot. Then he quickly shook his head and waved his hand, shouting. I'm not. I don't have it. Why suddenly appeared from home in the wilderness is a thought-provoking question. If it's a kidnapping, but no kidnappers were seen nearby. And there were also some issues with the confinement environment after the kidnapping. He was not bound, and the kidnappers even gave him an Ultraman toy to soothe his emotions. So, is it a spoof? What kind of program is so audacious, breaking into homes without consent and kidnapping citizens? Besides, why did he sleep so soundly? Lu Yu scratched his head in confusion, and suddenly remembered that he had seen two familiar giants fighting in a daze before. One seems to be the Ultraman of the galaxy, and the other seems to be the Dark Roadbed Al. Looking at the back mountain and nearby buildings now, I feel more and more familiar with them. Thinking of this, Lu Yu stared at the dark spark in his hand and fell into contemplation. He rubbed the toy with a good feel, squinted slightly, and placed his thumb on the red gemstone at the handle, pressing it hard. Unable to move, this is indeed a pirated toy. However, the next moment, a deep and gloomy voice suddenly rang out in Lu Yu's mind. Oh, it seems that your child has already discovered my existence. Lu Yu was stunned for a moment, then began to despair. Woo 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 woo, I have indeed traveled through. Roadbed Al. What he held in his hand was not a genuine toy from a certain generation, but a genuine prop from the Ultra world. Lu Yu now felt that this thing was just a hot potato and was so scared that he quickly threw it away. The dark sparks that were thrown out flickered and returned to Lu Yu's hands in an instant. Lu Yu forcefully threw it far away. The next second it came back. As the young man tried to throw it again for the third time, Gigi Al couldn't bear it anymore and said, You're reckless. Human, I warn you that it's best to obediently follow my arrangements, otherwise I'll completely devour your soul. Lu Yu paused for a moment, his narrow and long eyes narrowed slightly, and the faint gray mole below the left eye's tail became slightly sharp. He calmly said, I have a question. If you really can easily devour my soul, why would you still allow my consciousness to exist now? If you want this body to help you act, you should have taken action as soon as possible, not just negotiating with me. So, you can't do it. The young man's last words were quite firm, with a confident glow in his eyes. Aier choked up and said. Weren't you crying just now? Lu Yu scratched his head shyly and said awkwardly, Well. I want to cry and I can think are two different things. He knew very well in his heart that this was Ultraman's world, a world of idealism and light. The darkness is here, either killed or killed. Look at the ruins in front of him, which is the burial ground of the Dark Roadbed where Al Gang was buried. He doesn't want to follow in the footsteps. At this moment, Lu Yu's heart suddenly moved, and if he felt something, he turned his head to look. The young man standing on the hillside was surrounded by a dazzling light, a telepathic force that automatically made his mind aware of the other person's identity. Galaxy Ultraman. Roadbed Al. The human body of the galactic Ultraman looked at him and shouted loudly, as if there was anger in his voice, and that anger may also be about to turn into a light, burning forward without a trace. Lu Yu is panicking. I'm not. I don't have it. No female lead, the protagonist is timid, a growth-oriented teenager. Non-black deep residual direction, it is walking the path of light under the guise of darkness, and the protagonist is a kind little white flower, perhaps. The mind clearance post in this book has been placed at the top. For those who have mind points, it is recommended to read the book after reading the post. Don't be set to mine and then post a book review saying that I'm doing backstabbing, don't cut. New book for tickets. Please take care of yourself. This book prohibits the use of insulting and vulgar memes. Friendly communication among everyone. End of this chapter. Chapter 2. Weak, poor, and helpless. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 2. Weak, poor, and helpless, you misunderstood. As Lu Yu watched the face of the Milky Way human body become increasingly serious and didn't want to be beaten up as a monster, he raised the dark spark in his hand and quickly said, I just passed by here and saw something on the ground, so I picked it up. The auditorium looked at him with strange eyes and said, Are you passing by here? Lu Yu nodded frantically and said, Yes, yes. I absolutely have nothing to do with Aier. The light in the auditorium's eyes became even more strange. Do you know what identity GGL is? Lu Yu suddenly froze. Just seeing the human body of the Ultraman galaxy made him panic, and his brain didn't even have time to think. Now think about it, when the galactic Ultraman was fighting against the Dark Ground Owl, the fallen star town was trapped in a barrier and he couldn't even enter. In fact, he didn't need to distance himself from the Ground Owl. Because he probably doesn't know GGL. The auditorium light had already taken out the Milky Way spark with vigilance, walked down the slope, frowned, and looked at the boy not far away. Lu Yu looked obedient and urgently made amends, I'm sorry I lied. Actually, I just saw two giants fighting here outside, but suddenly I didn't know what happened and was knocked unconscious by this thing. He cautiously gestured for the dark spark towards the auditorium light and continued, when I woke up, I found that the black giant had run into my body. He said he was GGL and had already merged with me. Aier. Your kid is very good at making up. Lu Yu ignored him, hoping that AI would look at the Milky Way Ultraman human body in front of him. At a glance, Guangming in the auditorium confirmed that he had the aura of GGL here. He probably didn't have much chance to hide it, so he had to detour and find another solution. Be frank and lenient. Resist strictly. By appealing to emotions and reasoning, the giant of light will never do anything to him. The auditorium light was indeed stunned and said, How could this be? He remembered his relationship with the Milky Way, and their current situation was exactly the same. Moreover, although this young man looks very cold, after a few words, it seems that his personality is also quite easy to get along with. For safety reasons, the auditorium light still asked his partner's opinion in his heart. Galaxy sang, What do you think is going on? Although he has been fighting as a galactic Ultraman for quite some time, he still has some understanding of the nature of the giant of light. The voice of the Milky Way was also hesitant. Their breath intertwined, and I couldn't distinguish whether it was like this or not. Why not recycle the dark sparks first? When the auditorium light nodded and looked at Lu Yu again, his expression softened a lot. You haven't been hurt much, have you? He even asked with concern. It's okay, I'm fine. Lu Yu nodded, moved, and didn't even wait for the auditorium to ponder how to speak. He took the initiative to offer a dark spark and said, I can't handle this either. Why don't I leave it to you for safekeeping? He took the initiative, but instead left the auditorium dazed for a while. The human body of the Milky Way became very embarrassed and reached out to pick it up, apologizing, I'm sorry, because the roadbed is of great importance, I have to retrieve it. Lu Yu expressed great understanding and said, it's okay, before slapping the dark sparks onto the bare hands of the auditorium. After giving everything, Lu Yu breathed a sigh of relief. The light in the auditorium is from the galaxy Ultraman, so he should have a way to cure the roadbed right? In an instant, the dark sparks flickered with light. Before the light in the auditorium could be grasped, a dark spark suddenly flew up, and even this time it turned into a dark light and disappeared into Lu Yu's body. Lu Yu lowered his head to look at his chest, then looked up at the Milky Way human body in front of him, whose expression had once again become strange. Both of them fell into silence for a moment. Kid, you can't escape. Just obediently fall into the dark abyss. The mournful laughter of Aier echoed in Lu Yu's mind, perhaps because he had seen him eat his food, and at that moment he was laughing even more arrogantly. Lu Yu continued to ignore his threat and looked at the dimly lit auditorium, asking, what should we do now? The auditorium light regained consciousness and weakly asked Galaxy Ultraman in his heart. Galaxy sang, what should we do now? After a moment of silence, the Milky Way said, we have just fought and our strength is very weak now. I am unable to communicate with Kiji Al now. Why don't we let them continue to maintain this state for now? Then the auditorium light briefly recounted the meaning of the Milky Way to Lu Yu. Lu Yu's eyes were skeptical as he said, so, continue to keep Aier inside me until you find a solution. The auditorium was full of apologies and said, don't worry, I will protect your safety and never let him harm you. Lu Yu. Then you won't hit me, will you? The auditorium light was taken aback and shook his head, saying, you are innocent, of course I will not fight against you. Lu Yu breathed a slight sigh of relief. Fortunately, the warriors of light can all carry them clearly. Although he is currently Jiao, once he expresses his stance, there will not be any dark scenes of being defeated by Ultraman for the time being. I just hope that during this period, Jiao won't cause any trouble, and he doesn't want to be sacrificed either. After the battle, the back mountain of Jiangxing town was in chaos. The two of them walked towards Jiangxing Elementary School, while the auditorium light explained to Lu Yu who the two giants who were just fighting were. Speaking of which, is Lu Jun a resident of Jiangxing town? The auditorium asked curiously, as he had never seen a young man in his impression. No, I'm on a trip. I've been passing by here recently. Lu Yu obediently shook his head. Hey, really? The auditorium's eyes lit up and he exclaimed with some surprise, actually, I've been traveling around the world before and I really enjoy seeing those different landscapes. Our Earth is really beautiful. The last sentence he uttered was a sigh of emotion, as his gaze towards the sky added a different meaning, with a gentle and immense tolerance. Lu Yu didn't quite understand his feelings, but he was very good at agreeing. Yes. The scenery around the world is beautiful, and there are also some interesting places. Although he had never really traveled outside, his rich experience in surfing the internet made him talk about those famous scenic spots and historical sites as if he had experienced them firsthand, and immediately captured the envy of the auditorium light. Although the auditorium light has been to many places, he is still young and has not traveled too much. After being infected by Lu Yu's travel experience, he couldn't help but enthusiastically share his experiences, as if he knew everything. So by the time they arrived at Jiangxing Elementary School, the two of them were already close friends and had even made plans to travel together next time. This is probably, it's hard to meet a close friend in life. Look how much this galactic human body trusts and admires him now. Do you think so? Aier. Ah, you really know how to decorate. After the two returned to Jiangxing Elementary School, childhood friends who were originally worried about the bright auditorium and the bright auditorium welcomed them one after another. The Milky Way human body is different from the typical Ultraman routine. On the first day of the transformation of the Hall light, it was discovered by Sherdong Meiling. Continuing until the end, it was only natural for everyone in the Fallen Star Elementary School to know his identity and transform into a refueling team to pass on courage to the Galactic Ultraman who was fighting against Kikale. The battle had just ended, but the light from the auditorium did not appear for a long time, causing everyone to worry for a long time. It was only then that they finally saw him. Little light. Sherdong Meiling was the first to run up and threw herself directly into the arms of the auditorium light. Lu Yu, who was originally following beside him, instinctively jumped away. Later, due to his excessive avoidance movements, the other few people turned their attention to him. Although this young man is very good-looking, he also seems to be very unattractive, with a cold and sharp feeling in his eyebrows and eyes. "Who is he?" asked Kentai Dokai directly. "Oh, he's a friend I met on the road." The auditorium light reacted and quickly introduced, "His name is Lu Yu. He passed by here recently while traveling." "Hello." Lu Yu obediently curved the corner of his mouth to say hello, instantly diluting the fierce feeling. For the sake of taking care of the young man's mood, the auditorium light did not reveal the situation where the other party had been parasitized by Aier, so as not to worry the young friends. After the introduction of the auditorium light, everyone also greeted in a friendly manner. But a temple friend silently looked at Lu Yu, with no emotion on his expressionless face. He just stared at Lu Yu with sharp eyes. Looking straight at Lu Yu, he smiled on the surface and sweated coldly from behind. "What are you looking at me for? Why do you keep looking at me? I warn you not to stare anymore." Lu Yu really wanted to make a cold expression on his face to scare off a temple friend, but in the end he still hesitated and moved towards the auditorium naked. The protagonist is not Kiji Ao. The protagonist is not Kiji Ao. The protagonist is not Kiji Ao. End of this chapter. Chapter 3. Roadbed Ao, where is your dark spark? You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 3. Roadbed Ao, where is your dark spark? After catching a glimpse of Lu Yu's small movements, a temple friend also twitched his lips, but in the end, he took the initiative to shift his gaze away. In fact, he just thought this person was a bit strange just now, and couldn't describe that feeling, so he stared at him for a while, and never expected that he would even scare people. So why is this guy so timid despite his strong appearance? Sure enough, the dangerous feeling just now was just his illusion. After cheering for victory with the members of the auditorium, everyone made plans to come out for dinner tonight. However, before that, they still need to tidy up the Falling Star Primary School and the back mountain. By the way, while cleaning, the light from the auditorium leaned over to Lu Yu and said, "Actually, I plan to travel again soon. Do you want to come with me?" Lu Yu, who was lost in thought, paused for a moment and said, "Ah." In a daze, he remembered the original plot of Galaxy Ultraman. The Hall Light had always been on an endless journey, and the reason why he suddenly returned to Fallen Star Town was mainly because of the call of the Galactic Ultraman, who specifically came back to inherit the light. Later, after completing the Dark Roadbed Ao, the Galactic Ultraman temporarily separated from the auditorium light, and the Galactic returned to the universe, while the auditorium light continued its journey. This young man really enjoys traveling. And now, due to the roadbed, even if he doesn't want to follow, there's nothing he can do. Lu Yu pondered in his heart and scratched his head, feeling embarrassed and saying, "Okay, I guess I can only follow you in this situation now. And moreover, I also love traveling to different places, and we can just go on adventures together." Lu Yu, who almost realized his true thoughts, quickly added the following sentence. "Gigi Al, don't worry, kid. After my power is restored, you don't need to be constrained by them anymore. We will devour the Ultraman galaxy together and rule the entire universe. Lu Yu continued to ignore Aier's second speech. Who didn't know that Aier's ideal was not to rule the world at all? If he believed these words, he would be really foolish, so Lu Yu just ignored them and smiled warmly at the light in the hall. Okay. Then let's go on an adventure together. The auditorium light received his consent and a very happy smile appeared on his face. At night, everyone had a picnic and admiring the moon on the playground of Jiangxing Elementary School. The auditorium light also shared his idea of leaving with everyone, and in the midst of sighs, he received encouragement and support from his friends. Dong Meiling's mood was still not very high, and the auditorium just glanced at her. These two people were originally sitting with everyone, but suddenly they left the gathering place at some point and ran to the side to whisper. The scenery after the war has always been very beautiful, with a misty blue sky and a shining moon. Lu Yu sat in the corner of the picnic mat, silently eating a sandwich. He glanced at a temple friend who was being teased by everyone, and there was laughter and joy. Then he glanced at the auditorium light that was hiding to the side and chatting with Dong Meiling, where pink bubbles appeared. The joys and sorrows of people are not interconnected, he only feels that the night is particularly dark. Aier. Humans are a group of dull and simple beings, and their most suitable state is when they shut up and are quiet. Lu Yu swallowed the sandwich and sighed in his heart, I see you're the one who should shut up. You've been nagging all day, take a break, brother. After realizing that Aier might have no way to deal with him, Lu Yu's courage also increased a lot. After all, if Aier could really take action, he would have already taken action against him. His goal is very clear, to get the malignant tumor of Al out of his body as soon as possible. As for being a dark villain in Ultraman's world, forget it. Lu Yu thought to himself. If he had to choose one, I'm sorry. He would rather become Pigmont than become the Dark Roadbed owl that everyone shouts and beats. Aier. How dare you compare me to Pigmont? Don't want Pigmont. How about Gamara? Bastard. Don't confuse me with those stupid monsters anymore. You sound like you're not like a monster. Monsters are often defeated by Ultraman, and you are also often defeated by Ultraman, so you are a monster. There's nothing wrong with it. Damn brat. If I hadn't seen your body, would you think I would have chosen you? It seems like I don't need to keep you anymore. Listening to the angry voice of Aier, Lu Yu couldn't help but cry inwardly. Does Aier have any other backup? As a result, he waited for a while without feeling any discomfort, while the roar of Al continued. Lu Yu. So what did you do? Roadbed Owl. Strange, why hasn't this human responded? No matter what, at least the mind will be influenced by him. That's how Principal Shirai, who was once a member of the Falling Star Elementary School, was influenced by him. With this in mind, Aier asked suspiciously, aren't you human? Lu Yu. You're not a human. Lu Yu felt that things couldn't continue like this. It seemed that Aier had other options. What if this guy really wanted to die with him by then? Glancing at the auditorium light not far away, which was in contact with Dong Meiling, after some thought, Lu Yu still got up and walked over. Xiaoguang, I have something to do. The light bulb walked behind the two people chatting and made a somewhat embarrassed sound. Dong Meiling turned her head to see him and immediately became even more embarrassed. She hurriedly stood up and said, well. Then you guys can talk first. I'll go over and have something to eat. The auditorium watched her run away in a daze, then turned its gaze to Lu Yu and said, Lu Jun, what's going on? Lu Yu sat in Dong Meiling's original position and obediently confessed, it seems that Aier can hear my voice, and he seems to have other means to manipulate me. He even threatened me just now. Do you have any way to restrict him? Hey! You wait. As it was a serious matter, the auditorium light immediately became serious and asked the galactic Ultraman in his heart if there was a solution. The Milky Way thought for a moment and said, "You ask him to take out the dark sparks." The light in the auditorium immediately conveyed, "Lu Juan, where is the dark spark of Aier? Can you take it out?" Lu Yu directly asked Aier, where is your dark spark? Roadbed Al. Are you telling my archenemy in front of me that you want to restrict me, and now you want me to give up the method on my own? Do you think you're normal? Gai remained silent and pretended to be dead. Originally, the dark spark was in Lu Yu's hands, but because he had lost it too many times, the dark spark ran directly into his body. Lu Yu doesn't quite understand how to take it out. Xiaoguang, how do you usually take out your Milky Way sparks? Lu Yu asked curiously. It's always in my hands, said the hall light as he turned his head and took out the Milky Way spark. You put it in your pocket. Lu Yu stared blankly at his pants pocket. To be honest, with the size of a Milky Way spark, it would definitely be a bit heavy and bulging in his pocket, but Lu Yu never noticed that there was also a shape-shifting device in his pants pocket throughout the journey. Is this really a 4-dimensional pocket? But in some episodes, the auditorium light does indeed drop out a transformation device during collisions, indicating that it should have been placed in the pocket of his clothes. Lu Yu couldn't help roast. Your pocket can really hold it. The auditorium light smiled awkwardly and continued, Lu Juan, please try to guide the power inside your body out. Aier is now in the same state as you, and that state should be similar to me and In Hasang. Oh, I'll give it a try, Lu Yu nodded. But he also didn't know how to guide his strength, so he just stretched out his hand dryly and held back his breath, exerting himself. After a while, there was no movement. Lu Yu actually feels a bit like going to the bathroom. Lu Yu. Just as he was silent, the hall light suddenly reached out and grabbed his open palm, followed by a warm current flowing through his entire body. Lu Yu was surprised to feel that his chest was heating up, and slowly a black mist surged out. The light and mist condensed into dark sparks, which fell with a snap on Lu Yu's lap. The auditorium light breathed a sigh of relief, then picked up the dark spark, and a dazzling light spread from his palm, enveloping the dark spark. Then, Lu Yu's mind rang with the angry cries of Aier. Are you a fool? I actually let them limit me. I can give you powerful power to rule the entire universe above everyone else. Lu Yu blinked and said, I guess you'll kill me as soon as you recover your strength. You don't really think I'm a fool, do you? Aier. I wouldn't do this, we're all one-hearted now. Lu Yu. Trust Rikia is better than trust you. Lu Yu understood very clearly that he was just an ordinary person and currently had no power to fight against Aier. Therefore, once Al regains his strength, he will definitely immediately occupy his body, just like Principal Shirai becoming his puppet. This is the price of acquiring the power of darkness. End of this chapter. Chapter 4. The Galaxy's S rolling arrival. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 4. The Galaxy's S rolling arrival. After the picnic at night, Al was limited by the power of the Milky Way and finally couldn't always listen to Lu Yu's voice, and then ran out to force him to nag. The next morning, the auditorium light, which was eager to set off, was ready to go. This guy really just came back to his hometown to fight a monster. After fighting the monster, he immediately resumed his journey. Xiaoguang, remember to send postcards back often. Don't get too excited and forget about us all, said the friends of Jiangxing Elementary School as they stood by the roadside to bid him farewell. I will, goodbye. The auditorium smiled and waved goodbye to everyone. He was carrying a backpack, while Lu Yu was relaxed and had nothing to do. In fact, he had already started worrying about travel funds. Xiaoguang, what is your usual travel plan? Lu Yu asked tentatively. Where I go is where I go. Although I sometimes go to famous scenic spots and historical sites, my dream is to travel to every place in the world and become the world's #1 adventurer. The hall smiled brightly. I mean, you probably don't have a job, right? Lu Yu hesitated for a while before finally speaking politely. This Ultraman doesn't seem to understand his meaning. Moreover, the auditorium seems to be still 17 years old without graduating from high school this year, while Lu Yu actually happens to be only 17 years old. So both of them are minors. The auditorium suddenly realized upon hearing this and said, "Don't worry about that. Sometimes I perform on the streets in some places, but it's actually quite interesting." Lu Yu. Street performances. Let's just perform. There must be a way for the car to reach the front of the mountain, and the two adventurers wouldn't even be unable to leave Japan. Finally, it turned out that Lu Yu's concerns were completely unnecessary. Because the auditorium light is a wealthy second-generation guy. They bought tickets at the airport and headed straight to London for check.in at the first stop. Lu Yu. It's because my pattern is too small. And as an adventurer, the auditorium light not only travels around, but also sells the landscape photos he takes to newspapers to earn royalties. This made Lu Yu, who ate and drank for free, feel particularly ashamed. Let's just eat and drink for free. Occasionally, the galactic Ultraman will come out to teach him how to control the power of the dark spark, and regularly seal the restless dark foundation owl. The restoration of power is irreversible. Because the Dark Foundation owl is essentially integrated with the Ultraman galaxy, the galaxy can slowly restore the power of light, and the Foundation owl can naturally do the same. But equally, they can also restrain each other. The days of traveling are dull with some twists and turns. After all, it is a team of real adventurers and a false adventurer, a combination of light and darkness. Lu Yu doesn't know anything, but with his knowledge on the internet, he can still deceive innocent light with nonsense. Time flies like a white horse, at night. The deep mountain lit up from the flames of 2 tents. Lu Juan, what are you doing? After finishing filming the night scene in the auditorium, I saw the young man squatting in front of the tent, assembling something with cables and chips. The young man's face was calm, and the flames reflected on his sharp and angular half, making him hesitant. When there was no expression on his face, the young man did indeed exude a chilling and difficult to get along with. Then, he finished the things in his hand. Lu Yu raised his electronic tablet, his eyes lit up brightly, and he grinned happily with a sand-carved smile. It's done. The hall light, infected by happiness, also happily approached and curiously asked, "What is this?" "Roadbed L detector." Lu Yu smiled and said, "Of course, it's also possible to call it an energy detector. The effect is that as long as there is any small movement by the roadbed, I can see it through this thing. But it is essentially detecting energy fluctuations, so the power of the Milky Way can also be detected." Upon hearing this, the auditorium thought for a moment and then took out its own Milky Way spark. The shape-shifting device lit up in his hand. How to do it? As soon as the auditorium light finished asking, there were undulating lines running up and down on the tablet, resembling waves rising and falling one after another. He suddenly exclaimed in surprise, "How impressive." Lu Yu scratched his head with embarrassment and said, "Mainly thanks to you and the Milky Way teaching me how to control power during this period, I was able to simulate your energy fluctuations. Otherwise, I wouldn't be able to do it either. But Lu Jun is really amazing. You can also repair various tools and make navigation devices." The auditorium praised him. "Hey, it's not that powerful anymore. After my previous tools were worn out, I had to buy a new one, but those things have already carried a lot of memories and it's a pity to put them aside. Now they can all be saved and continue to be used. I think you're quite impressive like this." Lu Yu thought to himself. Only poor children need to sew and repair, and the one who buys a new one when it's broken is the most amazing. After playing with the electronic tablet he had just made, the auditorium light curiously asked, "Can we only monitor the energy reactions of the Milky Way and the roadbed air?" "That's not true." Lu Yu reached out and pressed the tablet a few times, explaining to him as he operated, "This key can enter broad-spectrum mode, and any abnormal energy will be displayed. Then, the radar will be called up in this area, and you see, it will light up." The auditorium light suddenly said, "Oh, how impressive. So this highlight means there's an abnormality over there, right?" Lu Yu nodded and said, yes. Hall light, dot. Lu Yu. Dot. Then, the two of them fell silent towards the bright spot on the radar, and in the deep mountains at night, only birds, beasts, and insects were chirping. After a while, the auditorium asked blankly, "So, is there an abnormal energy reaction right in front of us now?" Lu Yu scratched his head and said, "Yeah, should we go and take a look?" He never expected that as soon as he turned on the radar, he discovered an anomaly. The energy that could make the radar react was at least on the same level as the power of the galactic roadbed owl. Shouldn't it be a monster, right? The auditorium light is full of adventurous spirit. After making a decision, he immediately packed up his things and picked up the mountain tools to explore the way ahead. The abnormal energy was not far from them either. After climbing 2 small hills, they vaguely saw the faint blue light emanating from the nearby forest. "Lu Juan, I'll go over and take a look first." "Okay." Lu Yu, who followed behind, did not refuse. The auditorium light cautiously approached the mountains and forests, and then discovered that the glowing object was a cluster-shaped crystal half a meter above the ground. After confirming that there was no danger nearby, he signaled for Lu Yu standing nearby to come over. "It's a crystal, so beautiful," said the hall light, reaching out to tentatively touch it, but the next moment he withdrew his hand as if electrocuted. "What's wrong?" Lu Yu asked with concern. "Just now. I seem to see something in the crystal," said the auditorium light in a daze. "Screen." Lu Yu paused and carefully examined the half-meter-high crystal cluster, feeling a bit familiar. Crystal is a transparent emerald blue, emitting a faint light, and connected to the ground at the bottom, as if it has grown from underground. Wait. Underground. Lu Yu suddenly thought of something. This shouldn't be the Viclim crystal, right? Upon careful consideration, it seems that it has been almost 2 years since he and the hall light wandered around in the wilderness, and after that, it is the story of the galactic Ultraman S. At this moment, the auditorium light hesitated and said, "Lord Lu, in fact, I have always had a feeling during this period." Lu Yu looked at him with an indescribable expression and said, "Are you saying that you want to go back to Jiangxing town?" The auditorium light scratched his head and said, "Yes, Lu Jun, you guessed so accurately." Lu Yu. Dot. Thank you for your praise. 2 years ago, the auditorium light adventuring in another city was summoned by the Galactic Shrine and returned to Fallen Star Town, inheriting the radiance of the Galactic Ultraman. 2 years later, the auditorium light wants to go back. Lu Yu felt that he was just a ruthless worker, moving wherever he needed Big Brother Galaxy. However, in fact, Lu Yu doesn't really want to go back. Because he doesn't want to fight monsters. He doesn't want to fight monsters. He doesn't want to fight monsters. End of this chapter. Chapter 5 is all about Aier's fault. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 5 is all about Aier's fault. The movement of the auditorium light is very fast. That night, they decided to go back, and the next morning they said they had already bought their tickets. They were still in the deep mountains of Mexico and rushed to the airport in a hurry. In the afternoon, they were in Japan. Lu Yu. Dot. Who am I? Where am I? What am I going to do? The auditorium looked very purposeful, with Lu Yu following behind him throughout the entire process. The two did not immediately return to Jiangxing town to gather with their friends, but instead wandered in a mountain on the outskirts of the city of Lujuan. Aren't you curious why I'm here? Halfway through, the auditorium light suddenly asked. Ah! Lu Yu, who was distracted from chatting with Aier, was stunned for a moment. After realizing it, he scratched his head and said, Xiao Guang, you must have your own reason for coming here. After all, you are a galactic Ultraman. I'll just follow along. The auditorium light was stunned at the words and said, oh. Looking at the sunny and obedient smile on the boy's face, the auditorium's bare lips hesitated, but in the end, he didn't know what to say, just gave a dry answer. He has an indescribable feeling. Anyway, I feel a bit stuffy in my heart. After spending 2 years together, the auditorium light asked himself how much he already knew about this young man. Although teenagers usually have their own ideas, they seem to dislike expressing their own opinions. Most of them are in a passive state, with a feeling of letting go. To be honest, this is not in line with the personality of an adventurer. But perhaps due to the relationship with the Ultraman galaxy, the light in the auditorium also somewhat understood the reason why the young man acted in this way. At the end of the day, it's all the fault of the Roadbed Owl. Because the cunning dark demon Kiji Owl occupied the opponent's body, Lu Yu was so careful when interacting with him. It must be because Lu Yu felt worried about his own state. The auditorium had already made up its mind and made up its mind. After the power of the galactic Ultraman is fully restored, he must quickly find a way to solve the hidden danger of the Roadbed Owl. Only in this way can Lu Jun completely release his constraints and travel freely. So, the Roadbed Owl will die. Roadbed Owl. It has to be said that although the starting point of the auditorium light is a bit outrageous, the conclusions drawn are almost the same. Lu Yu does not express his opinions. Actually, it's purely laziness. But Lu Yu treated the auditorium with great respect as if it were a guest, which was indeed due to the relationship with Aier. He was afraid that Al would stick to him and refuse to leave, and in the end, it evolved into a hall light. For the sake of this beautiful world, he tragically and resolutely destroyed him and Al together. This ending. Bah bah. Damn it. As Lu Yu walked, he chatted with Aier and said, so how do you want to leave? I don't believe that after 2 years, you haven't recovered even a little bit of strength. Aier. But why do we have to separate? I think the posture after merging with you will be the strongest. We should rule this universe together. Lu Yu. That's why Lu Yu is so worried. Although after being sealed by the galactic Ultraman, Al could no longer read his thoughts, the two could still chat through consciousness. And after 2 years of mutual conflict, the Roadbed seems to have also become Buddhist. Even gave rise to evil tastes, and after seeing that Lu Yu wanted to leave him very much, he refused to leave. Come on. Hurt each other. Aier. Ha ha ha, you won't be able to get rid of me in your lifetime. Lu Yu. Whispering. Aier. Hey kid, I feel a good force from a distance of 200 meters on the left. You go over and take a look. Lu Yu. No, if you have the ability, you can go by yourself. Roadbed L, at #UN% #*. Al gritted his teeth secretly. Actually, he also wants to leave early. But the problem is, this human being is so vicious. Over the course of 2 years, Al did indeed regain some strength, but even so, he was unable to influence and manipulate the human mind. More importantly, he is still unable to detach from this body. He actually came up with it. However, it couldn't come out. But will Al speak up about this kind of thing? The chosen border, even if he regains his strength, he cannot control it. Such a shameful thing will definitely not be revealed by Al. Moreover, his strength has not yet reached its peak, and even if he can really leave, he is likely to be intercepted by the galaxy Ultraman halfway through. So the Roadbed Owl plans to endure for a while longer. And let him search for opportunities again. After finishing the conversation with Aier, Luyu looked up and looked around. And then it was discovered. The direction in which the auditorium light is currently walking. It seems like what Aier just said about 200 meters on the left, so Luyu, who is buried in his head and following the other party, is also walking towards this direction. Luyu. Chua, my face hurts so much. Aier clearly noticed this situation and immediately burst out with a burst of arrogant mockery. He's so happy to take advantage of this kid. Lu Juan, we're here. Suddenly, the auditorium light walking in front stopped its pace. While pleasantly speaking, it turned its head to look, only to see the young man following behind with a gloomy expression. The auditorium attendant immediately asked with concern, Lu Juan, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling unwell? Lu Yu sighed and said, I'm fine. It's just that Al threatened me earlier, saying there was power he could absorb ahead. He planned to take that power and ban me. Roadbed Owl. The auditorium light was taken aback by the words and then angrily said, don't worry, Lu Juan. The power of the Milky Way has also been restored almost now. I will definitely protect you. How about I add another seal to the Roadbed Air now? Lu Yu nodded with emotion and said, thank you, Xiaoguang. Subsequently, the auditorium light took out the Milky Way spark, and a beam of light flew out into Lu Yu's body. Feeling the faint aura of Aier, Lu Yu showed a satisfied smile. It has stabilized again. Roadbed Owl. Lu Juan, look quickly. Is that crystal the same as the one we saw in Mexico yesterday? After sealing the roadbed, the hall light pointed to the crystal pillar half protruding from the ground in the nearby valley and said. The two of them were standing on a cliff on a hill, only a few dozen meters away from that side. The position of the commanding heights can be clearly seen. In addition to the crystal pillars, there is also a cluster of factory buildings under construction in the mountain valley. However, due to the sudden appearance of crystals next to the factory, construction has temporarily stopped there. Lu Yu looked at the crystal from afar, then at the factory below, and his heart was already clear. He remembers the plot of the Ultraman galaxy quite well, and the story of the Galaxy S is developed specifically for the Victlan crystal. This type of crystal contains powerful energy and has therefore been coveted by the Cosmos organization led by the Chibulian Axela. It is worth mentioning that Axela's goal is to revive the Roadbed Owl. Is that the thing that summoned Xiaoguang back? Lu Yu asked nonsense as he looked thoughtfully over there. Should I be? The auditorium light scratched its head. At that moment, the ground suddenly shook. Right next to the Victlan crystal, a huge monster rushed out from underground. The monster has a silver-white body and a Tyrannosaurus-like posture. Its scales are layered like armor, making it look incredibly hard. Its eyes are bright blue, and a cluster of blue crystals grows on its back. Monster, exclaimed the hall light in surprise. Xia Parton. Lu Yu murmured softly. What? The auditorium light, who vaguely heard the sound, was taken aback and turned to look at him in confusion. Lu Yu, who had reacted, quickly remedied, I mean, what a big monster. Xiaoguang, are you going to battle now? The auditorium light has already produced the Milky Way spark. But he looked at the monster not far away, then at the shape-shifting device in his hand, and surprisingly showed a bit of hesitation, until several energy bombs were suddenly fired from the factory in the mountain valley to attack. It turned out that a car had arrived in the valley at some point. Two people wearing special combat uniforms were holding energy guns and constantly shooting at the monster. They seem to want to fight monsters. But the power seems a bit weak. The monster, enraged by the attack, immediately turned to the factory and walked towards it with great strides. Upon seeing the situation in the auditorium, He no longer hesitated and said with a serious expression, "Lord Lu, be careful here yourself. I want to stop that monster." Lu Yu nodded and said, "You go." Then, a dazzling light bloomed beside him. The light in the auditorium turned into a brilliant stream of light, rushing towards the monster with lightning power, and suddenly became huge upon collision. Boom! The silver-red body tattoo of the light giant landed cool, shaking up a cloud of dust. On the hill, Lu Yu stared at the Ultraman galaxy with bright eyes. How handsome! It is undeniable that the giant of light is really handsome. Aier. Jia, as long as you are willing to accept my power, you can also have such a posture. Lu Yu. Black guy, get lost. Roadbed L, at #UN% #*. Sign square root internally. Change the signing status 1 day before. The signing status will be updated 2 times a day. So while this book has not yet changed its signing status, everyone should quickly invest and earn some coins. End of this chapter. Chapter 6. I can do it myself. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 6. I can do it myself. Although GGAL's posture can indeed be considered a giant, and he is another thought of the galactic Ultraman. But this cannot change either. Compared to the shining light giant of the galactic Ultraman, the Dark Roadbed Al is really not handsome, cool, or good looking at all. Anyway, Lu Yu is very disdainful. Aier was furious. You are biased. Swear with your righteous heart, dare you say that I am really not domineering? Lu Yu. Ugly, ugly, ugly. Aier. So, after being scolded and familiar, the incompetent and furious howl of Aier began, and Lu Yu immediately blocked the consciousness transmission from the other party. This roadbed has poor endurance, it's just inferior. Not willing to leave. Sooner or later, I will force you away. Although Lu Yu had also thought that if Aier refused to leave his body, could it actually be because he couldn't leave? But he thought carefully. I feel it's unlikely again. After all, Lu Yu considers himself an ordinary person. It doesn't make sense that GGAL can easily control Principal Shirai, but he can't deal with him. It is estimated that GGAL was worried that he would be intercepted by the constantly watchful Ultraman of the galaxy when he came out, so there was no movement for a long time. So, the roadbed heir must be waiting for an opportunity. Coincidentally, there is an opportunity in the plot of Galaxy S. After all, the reason why the Chebel people snatched the Viclin crystals was to revive the Dark Roadbed Al, and the energy of those crystals must be sufficient. Lu Yu thought of these things. I feel very unhappy. He wants Kikuai to leave his body as soon as possible, but he doesn't want Kikuai's strength to be too strong. Of course, if absolutely necessary he can only cooperate with the plan of the Chebel Star people to give Kikale enough strength and willingly leave his body. Well, that's how Lu Yu planned. I just feel depressed after planning. So, after scolding Aier, Lu Yu's mood temporarily improved a bit. He looked at the battle in the valley, only to see the galactic Ultraman being beaten by the underground sacred beast Shepardon, looking extremely embarrassed. Lu Yu's mouth twitched and said, Although I know that the Ultramen would eat 1 or 2 bites before winning the battle. But when I really saw Ultraman eating flat, he felt that the scene was really uncomfortable. How did you fight in the auditorium? Take out your weapons quickly. Are you serious about taking half a step back? Go straight to the hook. What kind of wild chicken gameplay? I can do it myself. Lu Yu was crazy about roast, but the next moment, he suddenly felt something and turned to look to the side. A woman with a cold expression but a delicate and beautiful face stood on the hill, just over 10 meters away from him, gazing at the battle not far away. This woman is wearing a highly mechanical combat uniform, with a tall and sharp figure, making her look particularly familiar. Lu Yu immediately remembered the other person's identity. She is an intelligent robot sent by the Chebel people to Earth. 1-0. But later on, she was renamed Mana by Dong Miling. In short, it is an enemy battle that can be declared safe. At this moment, Mana raised her hand towards the Viclin crystal in the distance, and then a huge vortex appeared above the crystal, absorbing it in no time. After finishing these things, Mana let go and quickly turned her head to look at Lu Yu, her gaze sharp. At that moment, Lu Yu's pupils shook. He thought to himself. Even if it were a little sister who could be granted peace in the future, anyway, Mana is really a terrible enemy now. The terrifying enemy battle has come. Ah! Mana stared at him and raised her hand without saying a word. An energy wave emanated from her hand and attacked Lu Yu directly. Boom! In a moment of shock, Lu Yu quickly rolled aside and narrowly avoided the attack. Looking at the pit next to him that had been blasted out, Lu Yu's face turned pale, and his nervous heart pounded wildly. However, Mana's movements did not stop, waves of energy emanated from her hands, relentlessly bombing after Lu Yu's figure, and in an instant, dust was flying on the hill. Lu Yu quickly ran towards the direction of the forest, but Mana predicted his movements and the next attack suddenly exploded in front of him. Bang! Lu Yu fell backwards and coughed on the ground. At this moment, the roar of Aier echoed through his mind. Aier. Sleeping groove, lying groove, lying groove. What are you running for? Just go up and fuck her. Lu Yu. I'm just an ordinary high school student who hasn't graduated yet. I don't know how to fight. Al, you've learned a lot from following the Milky Way before, haven't you? Take out your dark sparks and rush up. Shoot out an energy beam and directly explode her. Lu Yu. No, I can't. During the communication, another shell hit, causing Lu Yu to panic and jump away. At this point, the roadbed Al is almost suffocated. Air. You really want to die, can you not take me with you? You said you look so imposing and useful, you can't even beat a girl. Lu Yu. Get out of here. Aier. Do you think I don't want to get out? Get out of you. If you die, you'll end up with 2 lives. If you don't know how to fight, let me come. Give me your body. Lu Yu. You have to manage it. Air. Quickly dodge. During the 2 years of fighting with Lu Yu, Aier didn't learn anything, but he learned a lot of nonsense from a certain Earth. Accompanied by the howling of Al in his brain, Lu Yu leaped again to avoid the explosion, and at this moment he looked much more disheveled than the galactic Ultraman just now. At this moment, Mana over there suddenly stopped bombing. She let go of her hand, her eyes fixed on Lu Yu without any emotional fluctuations, and her eyebrows pressed down a little imperceptibly. Mana is puzzled. Her computing power allows her to analyze the person's behavior patterns, but no matter how she attacks, the other party can avoid danger unscathed in a critical moment. How could this human be so capable of fleeing? Mana's gaze flickered, and in the next moment, she teleported over and suddenly appeared in front of Lu Yu, lifting her right leg high and attacking with a knee bump. Lu Yu was stunned and quickly blocked with both hands. After resisting Mana's attack, he suddenly lowered his body and launched a sweeping leg attack. Bang! Mana, who was only supported by her left leg, collapsed in an instant. However, before falling to the ground, she held onto the ground with her right hand to gain strength, and then performed a beautiful backflip, jumping a distance away. Mana landed steadily and looked expressionlessly at Lu Yu across from her. What happened? Don't waste time. Lu Yu's eyes narrowed slightly across from him, as if he had heard something. Then, as expected, Mana turned her head and pressed the mechanical component next to her ear, seemingly listening to instructions from the opposite side. Then she glanced at Lu Yu again before turning and leaving. Her movement speed was very fast, and she disappeared into the forest in the blink of an eye. Lu Yu naturally had no intention of blocking it. He thought thoughtfully that just now the Chebel people were directing Mana to continue to go elsewhere to seize the Viklam crystal. At this moment, Aier, who was still trembling, finally breathed a sigh of relief. Then anger starts from the heart. Aier. Do you want to be so cowardly? Even if you know how to fight, why hide like a dog? You can be afraid of death, but if you don't fight, you will die. Upon hearing this wise saying from a certain knight, Lu Yu pursed his lips. But even in battle, one will die. The protagonist is a little coward in the early stage. Please love him gently. End of this chapter. Chapter 7. Planning Communication. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 7. Planning Communication. In short, Lu Yu felt that he had survived the first enemy battle without any danger. Ultraman's world is really too dangerous. There are monsters everywhere, cosmic beings, robots, and musicians. Lu Juan, are you okay? Lu Yu was roast that he was sorting out his clothes. Suddenly, the concern and greetings from the auditorium came from his head. As soon as he looked up, he met a pair of nearby light bulb eyes. Ha! Isn't Galactic Ultraman fighting Shepardon? Seemingly sensing Lu Yu's confusion, the auditorium cleared up and said, the crystal on the ground was taken away just now, and the monster became very nervous and irritable. The Milky Way felt that this monster should have come out to protect the crystal. In short, this monster did not intentionally come out to cause damage. So the battle between the two sides also came to a temporary halt, and coincidentally, the light in the auditorium noticed the movement on the hill. Just before he was ready to support, the girl who attacked Lu Yu stopped and left first. Lu Juan, are you not injured? The hall light asked again with concern. Ah, I'm fine. Lu Yu patted the dust on his body and was surprised to find that he had not been harmed at all, even though a previous energy bomb exploded directly in front of him. But that energy bomb actually only exploded on the ground, not directly on him. This is the real reason why he wasn't injured. After all, as the saying goes, smoking is harmless. Aier. You are now in a state of empathy with me. You hurt yourself. Anyone who dares to rush forward can just leave that little girl behind. Lu Yu ignored him and looked at the Ultraman galaxy in front of him, saying, Xiao Guang, it seems that the girl just now was constrained by some cosmic organization. I heard what they said, and it seems like they are going to continue to the next place to seize the crystal like that. What? The auditorium light was startled and instinctively turned to look at the monster not far away. But I saw the monster howling angrily at the pit left by the crystal after it was pulled away, and then its claws dug a hole at an extremely fast speed to leave. In the blink of an eye, it disappeared on the ground. The monster left, and the crystal that suddenly appeared was gone. The valley suddenly regained peace. The Milky Way Ultraman naturally did not stop any longer, with scattered light particles on his body, and then his figure appeared directly on the hill. However, it's not very clear which auditorium to go to next. He scratched his head and said, I don't know what the origin of those crystals really is, otherwise we would have been able to stop them before the cosmos snatched them, but now. Halfway through the auditorium, the light suddenly fell silent. He suddenly turned his head to look in the direction of the small forest. Just beside a big tree, a young man wearing a brown robe, dressed as if he were an ancient green forest hero, stood there, gazing at the situation in the valley. The gaze of the auditorium light was attracted by the columnar crystal pendant worn by the other party's neck. Because last night when he touched the crystal in Mexico, the auditorium light had seen some illusions in his consciousness, which were a blurry giant figure, followed by a young man wearing a crystal pendant. But before he could take a closer look, the young man with a cold expression exchanged a glance with the auditorium light before turning around and leaving. Hey, wait! The auditorium instinctively chased after him, forgetting to greet Lu Yu in a hurry. Lu Yu naturally also saw the people over there. Victor Ultraman, fly. The memory plot of that young man emerged, and he was undoubtedly a good friend of the galactic Ultraman, a human from the underground world. Well, at the grand finale of this drama it was also him and Galactic Ultraman who, together, defeated the foundation of Al. Lu Yu shivered and rubbed his arms. This plot doesn't work. He must quickly find a way to break away from Gigi Al. Lu Yu remembers that the next location for Mana to seize the crystal seems to be at G7 position on the Hill of the Moon. But, where is the specific location of G7? In the drama, there has always been only one location code and no reference point at all. I have to say that the dimensional wall is really difficult to break. Ha! Xiaoguang. Xiaoguang. Wait for me. Lu Yu, who was standing on the hill thinking alone, regained his senses and quickly chased towards the direction where the hall light had left. Anyway, following the protagonist is sure to find it. It is worth mentioning that Lu Yu can accurately locate the position of the auditorium light. At this moment, the roadbed suddenly made a sound. Aier. Are you looking for the location of that crystal? Lu Yu paused in his footsteps. He asked cautiously, do you know? Aier. There is one on the left front, straight ahead 3,500 meters away. Lu Yu looked in the direction he said. Then he twitched his lips and said, what garbage navigation. That's a cliff. Aier. Haha. Gigi Al, who had been scolded again, was rarely irritable, but let out a proud and cold laugh. Lu Yu turned around and walked that way, but he found his own way to avoid places where he couldn't go straight, and the general direction remained unchanged. As he walked, he said, you have been exceptionally active since last night and even took the initiative to guide you today. As expected, the energy of this crystal is very effective in restoring your strength, right? The roadbed Al remained silent. Lu Yu continued on his own, to be honest, I really dislike you boarding in my body, so if there is a way to get you out, I naturally cannot help but beg for it. Aier. Hee. However, Lu Yu changed his tone and said, but I don't want you to enhance your strength in this way either. Aier's tone fluctuated and he said, so what do you want? After spending so much time together, I also see that you're not a fool. Are you having some ulterior motives when you say so much today? How about we make a deal? When he said these words, Lu Yu's heart pounded wildly, but his tone and expression remained calm and calm. Aier snorted coldly, let's listen. Lu Yu said, I can find a way to resurrect your original body, and then you will leave my body. Aier's heart skipped a beat and said, can you do it? Hey, who wouldn't know how to talk big, but you used to say you were just an ordinary human. I don't think you can do such a thing. Lu Yu spoke confidently, whether or not I can do it is one thing, and if I can do it is another. I will ask you, do you agree to leave me when the time comes? If you agree, I will immediately implement the plan for you. Aier fell silent, but he persevered for a while in an urgent mood before replying in a nonchalant tone. Okay, I promise you. Is it a deal? You must act according to your words, okay? Lu Yu breathed a slight sigh of relief. Gigi Al also breathed a sigh of relief in secret. Here, there is actually a reason for information misalignment. Lu Yu deeply felt that with the strength of Aier, he could have left his body long ago. He refused to leave simply because he was afraid of the Galactic Ultraman and wanted to use him as a human to restrain the Galactic Ultraman. So his goal has never been to sacrifice himself for the sake of light and justice, in order to limit the power of Kikale. Lu Yu only expressed his frustration with Gigi Al occupying his body, and then expressed his dissatisfaction with the improvement of Gigi Al's strength to lower the guard of this dark demon god. After all, we can't let Gigi Aier see that he doesn't really have any righteous thoughts, he just hopes the other party can leave quickly. Then Lu Yu made Gigi feel that he couldn't improve his strength even if he continued to stay in this human body. Finally, Lu Yu threw out the weighty temptation of recasting the body of Aier, luring this guy to leave voluntarily to enhance his strength. This is Lu Yu's brainstorming. The final transaction was reached. Plan to pass. But in fact, in the heart of Aier, Ma Dan, this human is so evil. I can't leave. Why can't I leave? What and what? This wicked human has the ability to resurrect my original body and is willing to let me return. Promise. Promise quickly. No, I have to be more reserved. Can't let this guy see anything. Plan pass. The term light in the auditorium is actually simply light, but when a single word sounds strange, it suddenly feels like he represents all the giants of light, and even clashes with Hikari's name. End of this chapter. Chapter 8. Roadbed Aier has bad intentions. You are listening at Novel Full.audio. Chapter 8 Roadbed Aier has bad intentions. Although Aier was careful and thoughtful, he was still correct in pointing the way. From afar, Lu Yu could see the Viclin crystal rising from the ground with half of its head, as well as a huge vortex absorbing it in the sky. Aier. Is the method you came up with using these crystals? After feeling these crystals, Aier also wanted to absorb their power to enhance his strength, but doing so may be discovered by Lu Yu. He originally intended to come quietly. But since they just reached a cooperation agreement, it doesn't matter if they come openly now, right? Because of the promise to revive his body, Aier's mood also became somewhat hopeful. Of course, he also has a lot of doubts. In the past 2 years, Al had already been tricked into obtaining a lot of intelligence by this cunning earthling, and even the crucial information that he and the galactic Ultraman were originally one was accidentally leaked. Although Urgin did not want to admit his relationship with the Milky Way, he despised the foolish, eternal concept of the Milky Way. The original meaning of eternity is immutability, can change still be called eternity. So in order to achieve his own ideals, this universe will eventually be ruled by his foundation Al. Looking at the crystal getting closer and closer, Al's mood became hot. Then Lu Yu said slowly, I need these things, but it's not entirely dependent on them. I came here just out of curiosity about the Viclin crystal, and by the way, I'll get to know the little sister from earlier. Aier. Are you going to retaliate against that person? The first thing that Aier thought of was that this kid was getting angrier and angrier about the battle just now, so he came over specifically to seek revenge. This kind of thing is not without it. Once upon a time, Lu Yu rarely failed to defeat Aier and retaliated by reporting to the auditorium, resulting in Lu Aier being sealed off to the point where he couldn't even speak during that time. This stinky kid, his revenge is so strong that it's terrifying. Lu Yu pursed his lips upon hearing the words and said, what kind of retaliation or non-retaliation? I can't even beat them. Aier. The two of them were talking and had already reached the crystal. A huge Viclin crystal rises from the ground, like a protruding hill, emitting a sparkling light. Lu Yu looked around and didn't find Mana nearby. Instead, he noticed a small hill-like cliff not far away. She should be there. Lu Yu took out his electronic tablet and began to detect the Viclin crystal. Although he and the auditorium had seen this type of crystal last night in Mexico, it seemed like the crystal had only come out to take a breath and quickly retracted. The Viclin crystal had always grown underground before, but it was only during this period that the Chebel people caused crystal mutations in order to seize the power of the crystal, which led to frequent underground drilling. And while Lu Yu was collecting crystal data, Aier was also secretly active, intentionally or unintentionally communicating with the nearby crystal energy. But at this moment, Lu Yu's gaze suddenly moved. Because the red dot in the upper right corner of the electronic tablet is flashing. This means that the roadbed Al is making small moves. He opened the interface and saw that the energy of the roadbed was connecting to the Viclin crystal, and the wave lines generated by both sides showed an intersecting pattern. It seems that Aier has not yet understood the effectiveness of this equipment, otherwise he wouldn't be so eager to take action. That's right, after all, Yu only came up with this thing last night and it hasn't been officially put into effect yet. But Yu thought for a moment. I don't intend to use this device as an excuse to expose the roadbed. He just suddenly said, I feel a bit active in my body. Al, are you doing something? Aier insinuated, no, I'm just as curious as you about what this crystal is, so I just made a little inquiry. After saying these words, Aier had already stopped his behavior of absorbing energy, which was somewhat like stealing food. Yu sneered in his heart. Lies. Clearly, it is taking advantage of the opportunity to absorb energy. But he remained calm on the surface and nodded, saying, the energy content of this thing is indeed very high, but this alone is not enough to revive your body. I need to make a plan. Aier. What plan? Yu said, speaking it out won't work. Roadbed Al. Why are you still being so perfunctory when you don't want to say anything, kid? At this moment, the ground suddenly shook violently. Not far from the Viclin crystal, the previously departed underground beast Shepardon charged out again, angrily spewing out a beam of energy towards the nearby cliff. Boom boom. The earth shook, and Yu, standing in the valley, was unsteady in his footsteps, while the monster above his head walked towards him after spitting out the glowing beam. Aier. Hey, hey, hey. If you don't want to fight, hurry up and leave here. Yu, on the other hand, was in a normal mood and said, Shepardon wasn't here for me. Shepardon just wanted to rescue Crystal. Sure enough, the monster passed by Yu's body without looking askance, and every time its huge and heavy feet stepped on the ground, it would trigger a vibration of the earth. Looking at this behemoth up close, Yu still felt a bit nervous in his heart, and even his nervous fingers were trembling. But with it comes an indescribable sense of shock. It's so big. The scales on the monster's body are clearly visible. There are really monsters like this in the world. Yu took a deep breath. So Aier began to secretly poke and seduce again. As long as you accept my power, you can also become so big and have the power to fight against them. Yu shook his head and said, forget it, I really can't fight. And you look malicious. Aier. Shoo, what are you afraid of with the seal of the Milky Way? Yu said, anyway, being so proactive is not good intentions. Roadbed L, at #UN%*. Just as the two were fighting each other on a daily basis, another huge monster descended from the sky and landed in front of Shepardon, blocking its way to rescue the crystal. This monster has a lava-like black body color, and the cracks in its scales seem to be flowing with magma. Its wrists are huge and sturdy, and its eyes without pupils are filled with a fierce red color. It's a skeleton monster, EX King Red. The reason why 2 letters need to be added is that the enhanced version of King Red is more ferocious than the ordinary monster King Red. Roar. Shepardon roared at the EX Red King in front of him, burying his head and charging towards him. The 2 monsters fought together in an instant. The valley rumbled in their battle. Bang! A huge rock suddenly flew out of the battlefield and hit Yu heavily, igniting a pile of rubble on the ground. Yu's heart trembled with fear. Aier was also frightened. He always felt that he might one day be executed along with this human. Get out of here. We must leave quickly. End of this chapter. Chapter 9. Roadbed L is just a commodity. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 9. Roadbed L is just a commodity. In order to avoid being hit by the aftermath of the battle, Yu ran towards the direction of the mountain slope, when suddenly there was another noise coming from behind. He turned his head and his footsteps were immediately fixed. Victor Ultraman. Yu's heart was pounding wildly. Although he avoids the dangerous worldview of Ultraman, he really likes the protagonist inside. Anyone who sees the appearance of the Giant of Light can't help but feel excited. That's so cool. Too handsome. This is the equivalent version of the Ultraman model. You look even more handsome when you move. Oh, he's shrunk from eating. As soon as Lu Yu climbed up the mountain slope, he turned his head and saw Victor Ultraman being punched and flying by EX Red King, hitting a nearby mountain, and the crushed stones and soil shooting fiercely in all directions. Bang! 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 The scattered stones hit the small hill at a relatively high position, causing it to be affected. Lu Yu was not hit this time, but there was movement coming from not far from him. Damn it! Upon hearing the sound, Lu Yu turned his head and saw the light in the auditorium trying to lift a stone higher than others, but his human body was not as powerful as Ultraman's. So he can't move it up. Xiaoguang, what's wrong? Lu Yu quickly ran over and asked. Just now the stone flew over and someone was pinned down. The auditorium light didn't look surprised when he saw him appear here. Because just like Lu Yu can sense the position of the auditorium light at any time, the auditorium light that is wholeheartedly aligned with the galaxy Ultraman can naturally sense where he is. After all, the Milky Way and the roadbed are one entity. Upon hearing this, Lu Yu glanced at the two people pressed under the stone. Wearing battle uniforms dominated by orange, these two individuals were just two members of the International Defense Agency's Special Search Team UPG who had just appeared. Due to the butterfly effect, UPG's Arisa Sujita and Takashi Matsumoto did not meet at the factory and auditorium. But encountering it here also has a similar effect. It is worth mentioning. The resurrection of UPG by Aier also contributed. Let me help. Lu Yu smoothed the sleeves of his hoodie, stepped forward to help, grabbed the base of the big stone with both hands on the opposite side, and lifted it up with a little force. The huge stone was thrown aside by him and then smashed into pieces. Looking up and down at Lu Yu in the auditorium, he felt a groove stuck in his mouth and didn't know if he should spit it out. He didn't really have that much strength as he was with the Milky Way, but Lu Yu, who was with the same heart as Aier, didn't have such worries at all. However, after thinking about it, it's not a good thing to be wholeheartedly with Aier. So the auditorium just held back roast. He looked at Victory, who was fighting the EX Red King, and took out the Galactic Spark Transformer. Lu Juan, I'm going to battle now. You can take care of them here, said the Hall Light. No problem. Lu Yu nodded, and then said directly, but why didn't you just change your body and use the power of Altman to move the stone away? Aier. Ha 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 ha, Hall Light. Dot. The silent incarnation of the auditorium flew out with a beam of light. Lu Yu looked at the two people on the ground. Sujita Arisha woke up relatively quickly, and in fact, the physical fitness of UPG players is not bad. Even if they were pressed by flying stones, it is also normal that it cannot be crushed. The two quickly helped each other up and saw Lu Yu standing next to him, showing concern and obvious confusion. Are you? Where was that young man just now? Sujita Arisha's face was full of confusion, as she said she was attracted by the movement behind her. She turned her head and saw two light giants fighting monsters. One of the giants is particularly familiar to the eye. In those 2 years when he appeared, although he never went out of the town of falling stars and was roasted by the public as the god of war behind the mountain, in fact, the international defense agencies have always been concerned about the battle behind the mountain. It was precisely because of the appearance of monsters and giants in Fallen Star Town that the Special Search Team UPG was born on the Hill of the Moon. In other words, the Galactic Ultraman is the beginning of everything. That person just now was my friend. At this moment, Lu Yu said, he saw you being pinned here, so he left to find someone to help. But just now, the Galaxy Ultraman appeared and helped you move the stone away. When Lu Yu was lying, except for his heart pounding faster, his face was unpredictable and his tone remained unchanged. Even in combination with his sharp eyebrows, stern expression, and quite imposing face, it is unreasonable to dare not refute. Sujata Arisha nodded awkwardly without saying much. Lu Yu looked at them, but his mind was constantly pondering. Due to the butterfly effect. This time, the auditorium light did not meet with the UPG team members in front, so there was no opportunity to show his brave side, which led to him being noticed by UPG captain Yoshiaki Arano and being absorbed. The recruitment criteria for the defense team in Otto's worldview are actually quite mystical. Except for the Heisei trilogy, which recruited members within the system, the other protagonists of the Otto worldview were more or less ordinary people without formal training. This is also the reason why the auditorium light can enter. But if there is no pre-plot, can the auditorium light still pass the UPG test this time? The reason why Lu Yu pondered these things was because the resurrection of Aier also had the contribution of the Human International Defense Agency, so he also wanted to try to sneak into UPG by taking advantage of the halo of the auditorium light. Not only for the sake of facilitating the recovery of the roadbed, but also for the salary after joining UPG. God knows how much rice Lu Yu has eaten in the past 2 years. In order to repay the funding from the auditorium, he was forced to become a technical mansion. So joining UPG, boom. A deafening explosion suddenly came from not far away, causing Lu Yu's reflexes to tremble. He quickly turned his head and saw that EX Red King had been blasted by the Galactic Ultraman's galactic cross light. At the same time, Mana, who was fighting alongside EX King Red, also flew out and landed on another hillside. Lu Yu reacted and turned to run over there. Sujata Ari suddenly felt a black shadow flash past him, so he instinctively shouted towards him, "Hey, wait! You!" But before she could finish shouting, the young man's figure had already disappeared into the forest. The speed is astonishing. Aier. And you said you didn't go to seek revenge from others. 100 meters on the right. Lu Yu ignored him, but followed the guidance of Aier and quickly passed through the overlapping trees. The next moment, he suddenly appeared in front of Mana. Shwa, Mana reacted extremely quickly putting herself in a combat posture, and even pulled out a mechanical ball in her hand. Wait! Lu Yu quickly stopped her movements. This mechanical ball can summon several battle robots, and Lu Yu doesn't want to be surrounded, and he really didn't come here to seek revenge. When can revenge not work? Lu Yu said, "The person above you is from Chebel Star, right? Please convey to him that I have a transaction that needs to be negotiated with him. If he agrees, you can come to me again. The target of the transaction is Kiji Al, and he will be interested." Aier. Do you consider me a commodity? Lu Yu ignored him and just stared closely at Mana. Mana looked at him expressionlessly for a while, then withdrew the mechanical ball and quickly turned away. Lu Yu breathed a sigh of relief upon seeing this. Not directly fighting proves that Mana did indeed listen to his words. Although this intelligent robot is just a manufactured robot, in reality, it is loaded with emotional circuits in order to transform into human functions. Mana actually has the ability to think independently. End of this chapter. Chapter 10. There will be a final battle between the main and deputy Olympic teams. You are listening at novelfull.audio. Chapter 10. There will be a final battle between the main and deputy Olympic teams, and after Lu Yu returned to the vicinity of the battlefield. It was discovered that the Galactic Ultraman had already engaged in a battle with Victory Ultraman. Although neither of these two had any hostility towards the other, the commotion in the fight was even more intense than when they had just beaten the monster. Dust was flying in the valley, light was bombing, and blood was boiling. Lu Yu. Wow, Roadbed Al, wow. It has to be said that the fight between Ultramen is much more beautiful than Ultraman's fight against monsters, so the two viewers simultaneously exclaimed. However, what Lu Yu saw was just flashy. GGAI is looking at Schadenfreude. Because when Victor Ultraman came out earlier, Kikale had a sudden thought in his heart, thinking that Earth would have another giant of light, which he feared would be difficult to deal with. But now that the Milky Way is fighting with the other party, GGL just wants to stir up the flames and shout to fight harder. You can't fight to death with such tickling fights. Apply force. How hard did you hit me back then? Yes, yes. Take out the Galaxy Spark gun. Compared to Aier's excitement, Lu Yu remained calm because he knew that these two people would not really hurt each other. Although the Galaxy Spark gun, which was not even taken out during the EX King battle, has now been taken out, but as the saying goes, there will eventually be a battle between the main and Deputy Olympic teams. The current situation. It was Victor Ultraman who was robbed of the monster's head by the Milky Way, so he felt angry in his heart. After taking away the spark doll transformed by the monster, he also gave the Milky Way a shot, and then planned to leave gracefully. But the Milky Way, which was bombed by a cannon, refused to follow. The auditorium was curious about the origin of this Ultraman, perhaps out of a desire to find companions, so they wanted to have more contact with Victor. But Victory disdains contact. Then the two of them inexplicably started fighting. At the end of the fight, both Ultramen exceeded their active time and started flashing red lights. Even the light in the auditorium was ignited at this moment. He held the Galaxy Spark gun in his hand and looked at Victory, who was equally exhausted across from him, charging fiercely towards him. Boom! The final battle ended in an explosion. Reflecting on the shining sun, both Ultramen who had hit their heads disappeared from the light. Lu Yu turned his head and looked to his side. The light from the auditorium condensed into light particles next to him, and because the battle was exhausting, he was still panting. He frowned and supported his waist, looking quite depressed. Xiaoguang, why did you fight that Ultraman? Lu Yu asked knowingly. I don't know either. I just wanted to ask where he came from, but he suddenly rushed over to fight me. Moreover, the Milky Way actually helps him speak, said the Hall Light in frustration. The Milky Way expressed helplessness towards the light fighting in the auditorium and offered a comforting word for Victor Ultraman's actions. So Lu Yu also stabbed him in the heart and said, I really didn't feel any hostility from him. Hall Light. Oh, it's me, the person who got beaten. Of course you didn't feel any hostility anymore. However, the auditorium did not feel depressed for long. After his physical strength recovered, he was once again a spirited young man who humbly accepted his vitality. There should be some misunderstanding. Next time I see him, I'll explain it to him clearly, said the auditorium light firmly. Lu Yu smiled and then asked, where are we going next? The Hall Light stretched lazily and said, let's go back to Jiangxing town first. It's been a long time since we last saw each other, and I don't know how everyone has been doing in the past 2 years. Okay. Lu Yu responded, but his gaze shifted slightly, clearly hiding some other thoughts. And it wasn't until they walked out of this mountain and arrived in the city. No UPG came to catch people according to the plot. Lu Yu couldn't help but sigh in his heart. Sure enough, there is still a deviation from the original plot, as there is no pre-plot, so UPG captain currently has no intention of recruiting the auditorium light to join the team. At this moment, the auditorium suddenly spoke casually, Lu Jun, do you have any places you want to go? Lu Yu shook his head and said, no, I'll just follow you. Speaking of which, it seems like I have never heard you talk about my hometown before. Where is Lu Jun's hometown? Said the audience in the auditorium, my hometown. Lu Yu was taken aback by the words and instinctively looked up at the sky. The sky is high and the clouds are light. In the distance, there is a white cloud that looks like cotton candy, which looks very cartoonish. After a while, Lu Yu withdrew his gaze and said calmly, in some corner of the world, it's a bit far away, and I don't have any plans to go back at the moment. He didn't lie this time. It's really far away. It's too far. That Earth may be one of the planets in the Milky Way, one of the universes in billions, or one of the timelines in countless ways. Lu Yu has no plans to go back at the moment. It's because he doesn't even know how to get back. He doesn't even know how to travel. Return an egg and stay for free lunch. Lu Yu adjusted his mindset very quickly, just like when he first realized that he was scared and crying after crossing the river, but he was able to quickly catch the drawbacks of Aier's possession. With these thoughts in mind, Lu Yu looked at the auditorium and said with a smile, "You don't have to worry about me. Anyway, I'm usually either on the way or preparing for a trip, so I don't have any particular thoughts about where to stay. After all, it's the same wherever I go." The auditorium light was momentarily stunned, and then awkwardly scratched its head. He is indeed a bit worried about the psychological condition of the teenager. However, Lu Yu did not seem to have any grudges. The auditorium just put a little dim sum in it. Then he remembered something and quickly took out a bag of chocolates from his pocket. "By the way, do you want to eat it?" Looking at the chocolate in his bare hands in the auditorium, Lu Yu fell silent for a moment before taking out more bags from his own pocket. He retorted, "Do you want it or not?" The auditorium smirked and took back the chocolate, opening it up to eat. Although the sunshine is still bright now, it is actually evening. The two of them took a flight for a whole day and then rushed back to the hill of the mountain, but basically didn't have much to do with their meals. They just don't feel hungry either. Lu Yu looked at the auditorium and ate the chocolate he had with him, his face strange. To be on the safe side, he handed over his 2 packets of chocolate. "Take it with you, I still have a lot here. If you run out of chocolate and encounter the starving Victor Ultraman human body, how can you increase your favorability?" The auditorium light did not refuse. Because Lu Yuding's hunger is stronger than his ability. Mainly manifested in the fact that when the two got lost in the deep mountains, the Hall Light of the Galaxy Ultraman was almost starving and unconscious, while Lu Yu, who was possessed by Aier, remained energetic and even had the strength to beat a wild rabbit to fill his stomach. "By the way, With a loud rumble. The Hall Light, who was eating chocolate, was about to say something when suddenly there was a violent vibration on the ground, and then all the light lines on the street burst. The auditorium light was uncertain in disbelief. What happened? Monster. Lu Yu looked at his feet and said, "Underground." The frequency of ground vibration struck from afar, passed under their feet and quickly moved forward. Something should be moving underground. Most likely it's a monster. After the auditorium light reacted, without saying a word, it chased straight towards the direction of the underground monster's movement. The earthquakes in this area quickly came to a halt. Lu Yu was originally running slowly behind the light in the auditorium, but suddenly he noticed something and his footsteps stopped. The corner of the street. Mana stood there, as if waiting for him. Sign square root. Starting tomorrow, there will be 2 daily shifts. End of this chapter.